A profound internal rift now haunts the Republican Party in the wake of electoral setbacks in both Wisconsin and Florida. In a period marked by unexpected losses and contentious debates over campaign tactics, the party's internal divisions have reached a boiling point. This report dissects the multifaceted challenges that have emerged, spotlighting the performance of candidate Randy Fine and the broader implications for the party's future electoral prospects. In a closely watched district, Randy Fine's campaign performance has defied expectations. Although forecasts had predicted a victory margin comparable to his previous run, the reality has been starkly different. In 2022, Fine had secured a commanding win by over 35 points. However, current figures indicate a considerably narrower margin. Despite Fine's repeated claims that his victory margin mirrored past successes, the factual record tells another story. One in which his performance falls significantly short. This discrepancy has ignited fierce debates among party loyalists and critics alike as the margins of victory and the credibility of public statements are called into question. Equally striking is the discussion surrounding campaign spending in this district. While media narratives suggest that millions of dollars were funneled into the race during the 2024 cycle, it is notable that outside financial contributions were virtually non-existent in this particular area. Instead, the reliance was on in-house resources, an approach that many political observers argue was both predictable and misguided. The fact that such significant spending was required, even when external funds were absent, has raised serious questions about the overall strategy and voter mobilization efforts within the district. Critics argue that this reliance on heavy spending should have been an unnecessary burden in a district where momentum should have carried the party to a decisive win. Randy Fine's political trajectory has long been marked by controversial positions that have alienated many within his own party. His support for imposing restrictions on Second Amendment rights in 2018, his opposition to a comprehensive immigration proposal intended to strengthen the enforcement of President Trump's immigration policies, and his advocacy for turning Florida into a de facto sanctuary state have all contributed to a contentious political persona. These policy stances have not only divided the electorate, but have also created significant internal friction among lawmakers who find his approach deeply problematic. In one instance, legislative colleagues even insisted on his removal from a key leadership role, opting to risk an entire board resignation rather than endorse his presidency over Florida Atlantic, a move that underscores the extent of his unpopularity among party elites. The recent election results in both Florida and Wisconsin have further illuminated the schisms within the party. In Florida, the two candidates underperformed dramatically when measured against the party's baseline for the 2024 presidential contest. Deficits of 16 and 22 points, respectively, painted a grim picture of the state's electoral landscape. Meanwhile, in Wisconsin, Susan Crawford managed to outperform the presidential baseline by an impressive 11 points, a figure that mirrors similar trends observed in previous contests in Pennsylvania, where Democratic candidates exceeded expectations by margins of 15 and 17 points. And these shifts are not isolated incidents. Rather, they represent a consistent, nationwide trend across 16 special races held since Election Day. Data compiled by political analyst Elliot Morris indicates that these special elections have collectively seen an 11.5% swing to the left, with Democrats even capturing seats traditionally held by Republicans. Historical comparisons with the 2017 midterm cycle reveal that these swings, although seemingly modest in isolation, signal a potential reordering of the political landscape as the next election cycle approaches. Within the party, a palpable sense of dismay and internal finger-pointing has emerged. Leaders and influential figures are increasingly engaging in a blame game, seeking to divert responsibility for the recent losses away from systemic issues and onto individual candidates. The narrative, pushed by some, notably by supporters of Governor DeSantis, attempts to attribute the shortcomings solely to the performance of certain candidates, such as Randy Fine. Yet, a closer examination of the numbers shows that Fine's underwhelming showing is emblematic of a broader trend affecting Republican candidates across various states. The figures do not lie. The underperformance in both Wisconsin and Florida is part of a larger pattern of electoral disarray, one that cannot be remedied by simply shifting the blame onto one individual. Adding to the complexity of the issue is the role played by campaign financing. In Florida, a staggering $20 million was spent in pursuit of electoral victories, a figure that, despite the hefty price tag, resulted in losses by double-digit margins. Meanwhile, in Wisconsin, billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk invested $25 million of his own money in a Supreme Court contest, only to see his late intervention fail to alter the outcome. Musk's tardy financial involvement, marked by accusations that he entered the race too late to be effective, underscores the critical impact of timing in political contests. Although his contribution was the largest in the race, it ultimately proved insufficient to overcome the entrenched disadvantages faced by the Republican candidate. The interplay of campaign spending, voter turnout, and strategic miscalculations in these special elections illustrates how financial clout alone is not a guarantor of success, particularly when such spending is seen as symptomatic of deeper organizational issues. The ramifications of these electoral outcomes extend far beyond the ballot box. In Wisconsin, the Supreme Court contest has become a lightning rod for broader debates about the politicization of the judiciary. Conservative voices have decried the conduct of the campaign, with one prominent judge expressing deep personal and professional disappointment over Judge Schimmer's loss to Judge Crawford. So, this judge argued that the overtly political nature of the contest not only jeopardizes the integrity of judicial decision-making, but also portends grave consequences for the state's legal system. The judge's remarks highlight a broader concern, that the relentless politicization of judicial appointments is undermining the foundational principles of law and order. As political allegiances increasingly dictate the composition of the judiciary, the risk of future decisions being driven by partisan considerations looms large, a scenario that could destabilize the impartiality of legal institutions. At the heart of the matter is a stark display of cognitive dissonance within the Republican Party. The ability of party leaders to compartmentalize conflicting ideologies and disregard inconvenient facts has reached unprecedented levels. Even as the party endures repeated electoral setbacks, some of its most ardent supporters continue to defend costly strategies and cast blame on external factors, such as lower voter turnout in special elections. They argue that the timing of financial contributions, citing Elon Musk's delayed entry, is an acceptable explanation for their failures. This internal rationalization, however, only serves to mask deeper strategic deficiencies and a growing disconnect between party rhetoric and electoral reality. The notion that a candidate's underperformance is merely an aberration in an otherwise sound political strategy is increasingly difficult to sustain in light of mounting evidence to the contrary. The internal discord is not confined solely to candidate performance and campaign finance. Comments from within the legislative ranks have revealed an undercurrent of frustration and disillusionment. Republican lawmaker McLean, for example, openly criticized the party's decision to pour vast sums of dark money into races that ultimately resulted in substantial losses. His remarks, which underscore the enormous financial risk taken by the party, are a damning indictment of a strategy that appears both unsustainable and disconnected from voter sentiment. McLean's candid assessment of the situation reflects a broader sentiment among party insiders that the reliance on aggressive spending and divisive messaging is not only ineffective, but also self-destructive. In this climate of internal strife, the party's public narrative is undergoing a dramatic transformation. No longer can the Republican leadership present a unified front. Instead, the internal fissures are becoming increasingly apparent as candidates and strategists engage in bitter recriminations. The case of Florida's newest congressman, whose appointment is seen by many as a mere expedient measure to remove an unpopular figure from the legislative arena, illustrates the depth of this internal crisis. His appointment, which many insiders describe in unflattering terms, serves as a stark reminder that the party's internal disputes are now being played out in the public arena, further eroding voter confidence in Republican leadership. Yeah. As the party braces for the challenges of the 2026 electoral cycle, the implications of these internal conflicts are becoming ever more evident. The failure to secure decisive victories in key districts, compounded by an over-reliance on divisive figures and unsustainable spending patterns, suggests that the current strategy is not only flawed, but also perilously out of step with the evolving political landscape. The Republican Party's insistence on blaming individual candidates, while simultaneously ignoring the broader systemic issues at play, has created a narrative of self-inflicted decline. In essence, the party's decision to align itself with figures whose rhetoric and policies are increasingly at odds with mainstream voter expectations has left it vulnerable at a time when unity and clear messaging are more critical than ever. The broader political implications of these developments are significant. As more Republicans find themselves on the losing side of hard-fought contests, the cumulative effect is a growing sense of accountability, or perhaps inevitability, that the party must confront its internal contradictions head-on. The spectre of a midterm cycle marred by further losses looms large, and the very fabric of the party's identity is being called into question. In this context, the reliance on divisive, dogmatic figures to salvage a faltering strategy is not only short-sighted, but also emblematic of a deeper crisis of confidence. The need for a recalibration of strategy, one that embraces unity and realistic assessments of voter sentiment, has never been more urgent. In conclusion, the recent electoral outcomes in Wisconsin and Florida are not isolated incidents, but rather symptomatic of a broader malaise afflicting the Republican Party. Internal discord, misdirected campaign spending, and a pervasive disconnect between public messaging and voter expectations have converged to create a scenario in which accountability is inescapable. The party's reliance on figures whose strategies and personal conduct have repeatedly proven counterproductive underscores a crisis of both leadership and vision. As the GOP prepares for future electoral battles, it is incumbent upon its leaders to confront these challenges with transparency and a willingness to reassess long-standing tactics. Only by addressing these internal fractures can the party hope to restore confidence among its base and chart a course toward a more cohesive and effective political future.